This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Jovian. Tonight we're taking calls and questions all about Camp Lejeune cases and veterans' disability. We're wrapping up Veterans Weekend. Thanks for all those who served, men and women who took care of us. We're talking about disability in cases that would be related to military. So you may have seen a lot of advertisements and billboards lately talking about Camp Lejeune cases. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, appears to be the cause, water contamination there, the cause of couple of dozen different illnesses, cancers, Parkinson's disease, and probably 1 million people were affected by water contamination there. So all of these cases that you're seeing come out now, we're going to talk about why you're seeing them come out now. We'll also be able to answer your questions about veterans' disability. So the 31 Law Call number, 256-536-0077. Call in your questions tonight and we'll answer those. You can also email a question. You can email anytime, any day of the week, any legal question. You email it to lawcall@waytv.com. And when we get to a show that's on point, we will have some of those, including some of your questions tonight. Getting us started tonight, Michael Timberlake's here from Timberlake & Lee. Good to have you here tonight.
It's great to be here.
Thanks to all of our veterans who have helped us and taken care of and kept us safe and free. Tonight we start off with You Make the Law Call. We've got a clip that's from YouTube. So before we get into Camp Lejeune cases, we got the cold weather that's coming up and here. If you suffer some damage, some ice, we got some video for you to show.
All right, let's check it out.
Ice off of the top of a building. If you get hurt by, wait for it, snow icicles that fall and
Ooh.
And right on top of vehicles underneath. Okay, so is that a lawsuit? Who's responsible for that? Shouldn't the folks who have this building have done something to prevent that?
Well, that's, it's one of those situations. So, people are going to look at it and say, okay, this is weather. This is a natural occurrence. This is an act of nature. So, why should the premises owner be responsible? Well, the premises owner still got an obligation, regardless of what weather comes. If it's foreseeable, if it's the type of weather they're used to having in this area, they've got an obligation to make their premises reasonably safe for people that are on the premises or for cars or vehicles or property that could be affected by a hazard on their property. So, basically they've got to do what's reasonable under the circumstances. They're not going to be able to prevent weather under all situations, but to the extent that you can remediate or you can mitigate the problem, reasonable people would do that, and that's what they need to do.
Okay. Tonight we're taking calls and questions about veterans' disability cases, right, and especially Camp Lejeune cases. And this is a special category. You
Sure.
brought with you a great expert to join us on this one.
Right. We brought Heath Brooks from our firm. One of the partners in our firm, been there for a long time, and we're happy to have him here tonight.
Y'all explain a little bit about these kind of cases. So suddenly we're seeing commercials for law firms, we're seeing billboards about this. Why are we suddenly seeing things about this?
Well, remember, a lot of people remember when, like, Jon Stewart was in the news a lot when he was hounding senators about veterans' bills.
Yes.
And the main bill that we talked about, that they were talking about in that situation, were the burn pits that were in Iraq that caused injuries, and they were looking for compensation for veterans in that situation. And he did a great job advocating for veterans, and ultimately the bill, with some reluctance, was passed, and it did include the burn pit compensation provisions, but it also included a number of other veterans provisions, and one was the situation for this water contamination at Camp Lejeune. It was the PAC Act. It was passed this past summer, and it provided some avenues to allow compensation for people that have been injured as a result of water contamination from 1953 all the way through 1987. This is Camp Lejeune's in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and there were a lot of Marines and Navy personnel that went through Camp Lejeune. Their families were there, and they have connected the water contamination to a lot of ailments, and this act allows an avenue for those veterans or their families to get compensation.
Heath, what kind of illnesses are they seeing out of Camp Lejeune?
This goes back a lot longer than just 2022 with the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. There have been damages in the form of liver cancer, kidney cancer, leukemia, all types of non-Hodgkin's melanoma, even some potential ALS types of exposure, types of causes. The contaminants were particularly nasty. They're PCEs and the TCEs, and they're from one of the things that you get when you have a close proximity to a dry cleaner, and it's specifically in the Camp Lejeune case, the water. The wells that were contaminated were in close proximity to a dry cleaner's office or dry cleaner that just dumped the contaminants onto the ground and ultimately into the water system, and so those PCs and TCEs got into the wells, and then all of these damages have resulted.
Okay, so do you have to hire? We see the commercials, big commercials and big billboards and ads and things. Is that the lawyer that you need to go to? Do you have to go to a lawyer that's advertising that they do these kind of cases, or can you go to a law firm that you know of? How do you do these?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of lawyers that are advertising for it because they think that they can make money, on these cases. Well, that's, a lot of lawyers are going to, take cases and try to present them and make money. But you have no obligation to, to call somebody that you see on TV or some national clearinghouse that's going to dump you into a big pool of people to make claims. You can talk to a local law firm. There's a number of firms they're looking at these claims. We're working with a number of firms that handle these claims. And essentially allow you to, to meet the lawyers you're going to work with and talk to them, and deal with it locally as opposed to, talking to somebody over the phone.
How do these kind of cases work? I mean, how do you prove your case, and what's the likelihood you're actually going to go to trial over your little Camp Lejeune case?
The Camp Lejeune cases are a little different than your average cases, and you really kind of got to know the system. With a Camp Lejeune case, you cannot actually file a lawsuit until you file an administrative claim with the Navy, with the Judge Advocacy General, with the Navy up in North Carolina. So that's something that's got to be done first, and it's very important that folks who have knowledge of these Camp Lejeune cases can gather the information necessary to file that initial claim, because time is of the essence in a Camp Lejeune case. President Biden signed the law on August the 10th of 2022. 2 years from August the 10th of 2022, your time limit is up to file this claim. And once you file the claim, then the Navy will get 180 days to either deny or accept your claim or enter into some sort of settlement negotiations before you can even file a lawsuit up in the jurisdiction is the Eastern District of North Carolina. So it's very important that as you go through this claim process, you gather the right information to be able to tie your injury or your loved one's injury to Camp Lejeune. Because the types of damages, the cancers, the liver cancers or the kidney cancers, those types of things, you've got to gather the evidence. And you've got to have the evidence that your loved one or you were there for the 30-day time period between 1983 and 1987 that is required. So there is some information gathering that is required that you probably would need to talk to an attorney that is experienced in handling those types of administrative claims so that we can get you in the right posture to have a lawsuit down the road. But time is of the essence on these claims.
Okay. Right. We've got some callers waiting. We've got Vanessa on the line with a question from Athens. Hi, Vanessa. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Hi. I have my dad's discharge record, and he was discharged from Camp Lejeune. He was there from December 1945 to June of 1946.
Okay.
And my question is, because it's 7 years to the deadline or the scope that the government has said, they stopped it at 1953.
Yeah.
Is this something worth pursuing, because he died from cancer as well?
Okay, and he was there from 45 to 46, and
Yeah.
they were talking about the window is supposed to be between 53 and 87. Y'all, is there
Right.
what do you do with that?
It's going to be worth looking at, but it may be tough, because essentially what the biggest part of what the PAC Act did in terms of Camp Lejeune claims is it set aside what basically the statute of limitations or the statute of repose that you could be allowed to sue the government in this situation. Most lawsuits have a claim or have a statutory, limit on when you can file them. Within 2 years of the date of the injury, but in no event to exceed a certain number of years. Well, because these claims happened such a long time ago, or the exposure could have happened such a long time ago, we're talking, 20, 30 years, probably at the best case scenario, and the damages weren't recognized. The Congress recognized that that's not fair, and so they waived the statute of repose for these service people that served during this specific time period. So if you served prior to that, you may not be covered by the PAC Act or the Camp Lejeune legislation, but it's worth looking into to try to figure out if there's a workaround. So, I would urge you to contact somebody about that case.
Okay. We've got Mary on the line with a question from Madison. Hi, Mary. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for calling.
Good, Mary.
Hi. My question is, my husband is currently 80% disability,
Okay.
and he's got some cases or some claims that have been remanded and are still being, still being looked at. But my question is, I know that there's a formula to calculate these percentages, and I wanted to know what would it take for that percentage to get up to 100%.
Yeah.
Well, the Veterans Administration uses a pretty complicated formula, and it really depends upon what the disability is. In other words, if your husband has a mental disability like post-traumatic stress disorder, that may be a different calculation than if there's a disability like the loss of use of a limb, or maybe another type of joint or muscle disorder that he would have. A back disability is pretty common when you're dealing with disabilities. But one of the things that you need to be careful of is when you are reapplying for those benefits, or say he got an 80% disability earlier and now you want to have it relooked at. You need to be gathering all of the information that you can. Like, for instance, you need to be seeing if you can get his military records or his personnel records, or seeing if you can get family members or friends to write letters that can assist you in getting the Veterans Administration to give you a favorable opinion on your case. So they can be complicated issues, but in terms of the calculations, it's going to be determined about what his particular disability is, and then you will gather all those disabilities together and go through the calculation process and figure out what his total disability rating would be in terms of employability.
Gotcha. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be right back answering more of your questions all about veterans benefits and especially Camp Lejeune benefits. Stay with us.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call, where lawyers come to help. Your rights, your calls, live. Hosted by family law attorney Sharon Dovia, with the personal injury attorneys of one of the Valley's most respected law firms, Timberlake and League. Featuring the knowledge of managing partner Michael Timberlake, with millions of dollars awarded to his clients. And the experience of attorney Will League, a strong courtroom fighter known for his commitment to winning. And the fellow partners of Timberlake and League Heath Brooks and William Meservey. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back to 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Dovia. Tonight we're answering your calls and questions about Camp Lejeune cases and veterans disability kind of questions. We've got with us Michael Timberlake and Heath Brooks, both from Timberlake and League. Camp Lejeune cases, we've got a graphic that kind of talks about what you're looking for here, and maybe you guys can start us off with that, because this is a different animal. You may qualify if. What are some of the things that we'd be looking at? You might qualify.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that we looked at is that you have to have been at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987, and you had to be there for at least 30 days. The big thing is you don't have to have been an actual serviceman to qualify for this.
Okay.
You were on the base with your family and you drank the water,
okay,
then you would qualify for that.
Gotcha. And we've got callers waiting. We've got, the name is Zinneman, and I'm not sure where Zinneman is. Hi, thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
I have two questions, ma'am. The first is there a time frame associated with filing this claim?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that Heath just mentioned a few minutes ago.
Heath, what's our limit?
You have to file an administrative claim with the office of the Navy, the general with the judge advocate general with the Navy within 2 years of August the 10th of 2022. So August the 10th of 2024 is your time limit.
What's your question number 2? Let's see if we can knock them all out. Zinneman, are you still with us? What's your second question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
My second question is, what if you believe that the water contamination went on longer than from 1987?
Okay.
Well, I believe that the water contamination probably did go on longer than 1987. There are several studies after, the initial contamination was found in 1982 with PCEs and TCEs, both of which came from a dry cleaner that was not next to the base. But further contamination in the forms of benzenes and vinyl chlorides and 30 other chemicals were found in the water supply at Camp Lejeune after 1982, 1987, and then they ended up shutting down the wells. So there's probably no doubt that there's still contamination in the water supply.
Okay. We've got Mary on the line with a question from Scottsboro. Hi, Mary. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
My husband was stationed up there after he came back from Vietnam.
Okay.
And it's Cherry Point, North Carolina, and I've heard him mention Camp Lejeune. Is that close to that?
Camp Lejeune was in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Okay, so it's nothing to do with Cherry Point, North Carolina.
I don't believe so, ma'am.
No, and I think
okay.
I do believe there was a study with some of the soldiers that were at Cherry Point to compare and contrast what the soldiers and what the folks at Camp Lejeune were getting in terms of diseases. And that was one of the ways that the military and other folks were able to figure out what was going on.
We had an email question that came in from Jeremy. Let's see if we've got his email question. He said, I think his brother had been stationed at Camp Lejeune around 1970, but he died of kidney cancer. His dad died around 1970. He was stationed there around 1970. He died of kidney cancer 7 years ago. So would my mom or my brothers and sisters be able to join this lawsuit on his behalf, even though he's no longer with us?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The lawsuits that you'd be able to make under the Tort Claims Act against the federal government for this situation would cover both injury and death. So it's one of those things. If you've had a loved one that's had cancer or God forbid has some worse situation and has passed away, it's certainly something to look at.
Okay, what's different about this? Didn't President Obama do something back a few years ago? How is this different from what happened back then?
Well, in 2017, under the Obama administration, and this was a bipartisan bill, but the Department of Veterans Affairs was given somewhere around $2 billion to administer to Camp Lejeune victims who had developed certain cancers, and and this was under the disability program, the Veterans Disability Program, and those folks that developed 8 or 9 different types of diseases, inclusive of kidney cancer and bladder cancer and adult onset leukemia, etc. They were given disability compensation. In other words, they were presumed to have a disability as a result of a contamination of the water at Camp Lejeune. Different now is that in addition to those disability claims that these veterans made, the lawsuit or the administrative claims have been expanded to anybody who may have drank this water during the time periods of 1953 to 1987. Plus, it gives a right of action to the family members of the individuals who may have already passed away. So, whereas the initial law just helped those then surviving veterans get a disability claim pursuit and actually approved, now there's a private right of action against the government for the being aware of and then disregarding the contamination.
Yeah, you can, if you're a veteran and you were injured, you can get compensation in addition to your VA benefits and the expanded VA benefits, and your family could get compensation as well if they were harmed or if there's been a death.
How unusual is this to be able to bring a suit, because this is a different kind of suit, right?
Yeah.
Against the government, essentially, is what you're doing.
Right.
I thought you're not supposed to be allowed to do that for certain things.
Well, there's certain things you can't do that they have immunity in some in these situations. But there's a way to make a claim against the federal government. It's the Federal Tort Claims Act. And so that if the federal government, say you get run over by a post person, then you can make a claim against the government for the damages that they were caused. But there's different procedures associated with that. You have to file the claim within 2 years. You have to give the government 6 months to decide whether they're going to settle the claim or not. If you pursue the claim, it goes into federal court. It's tried before a judge. There's a limitation on the legal fees that lawyers can charge in that situation. And the compensation can be a little bit different than just a normal state court proceeding. But there is an avenue for people to pursue the government when there is not, total immunity.
Okay. And is this different from what those kind of cases are?
I don't believe so. It's going to be very similar in terms of what you're going to be able to do: seek compensation, file a lawsuit.
Okay.
There is a little distinction with the merely by the fact that we don't really know what the settlement amounts are going to be quite yet, because the Eastern District of North Carolina right now there's not been the time for the administrative claims to be filed so that the Navy can deny or accept them, so that those cases can actually get filed in the Eastern District of North Carolina for the rules to be set up on how they're going to be administered. And I suppose that there'll be a couple of trials up there before we know how that's going to shake out.
Okay, so what do you need if you're somebody out there and you're thinking this affects me or affects somebody in my family? What do you need to gather? What do you need to do?
The biggest thing that and this is one of the things that military families are familiar with is what's called your C file, which is your medical file. And a lot of people that go from base to base or have been in the military are familiar with that. But primarily, that's your military, your full military record for everything that you have. Your discharge papers, if you're discharged, would be helpful, as well as any medical professionals or any medical records that you've seen for one of these disorders or cancers or diseases that you had after you were discharged from the military. Unfortunately, those records may be hard to come by because of the amount of time that's lapsed, but you need to try to do what you can to get those records as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay, let's take a break. Be right back answering more of your questions about Camp Lejeune cases and veterans' disability. If you didn't get your questions answered tonight, here's how to get in touch with Michael Timberlake and Heath Brooks with Timberlake and League in Huntsville. They are personal injury attorneys, so everything from car accidents to Camp Lejeune cases. 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com, and if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way. And I practice family law, divorce, child custody, 256-539-7337. Also check out Sharon Family Law. Okay, caller calls in and says, why are y'all talking about the Navy? Camp Lejeune was a Marine Corps base.
Camp Lejeune was a Marine Corps base in North Carolina, but the Marine Corps is essentially part of the Navy. And the claims are set up through where, Heath?
The Judge Advocate General of the Navy's Tort Claims Unit. So you actually have to go through the Judge Advocate General of the Navy to actually file your claim there.
And so, but it would apply to Marines or their families or anybody that was on that base.
That's
okay.
right.
Good questions. Thanks everybody for your questions tonight, and stay safe. And thanks to all of our veterans who served. Have a good night.
Good night.